All right, so we are here today. This is kind of a panel to talk about journalism for our students that are here in our professional development classes. And we've got a few alumni of the program here with us to talk today. So we're going to walk through this a little bit. Like I mentioned to you guys earlier, I want each of you to kind of just introduce yourself and tell us what your current job is and a little bit about what you do and how you got there. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Ashley.
Oh, okay. So I graduated in 2018 from Western, and from there I went and worked with a print newspaper and got that experience for about a year. Even had like a print paper route, which those are going out of style very quickly. But now I'm here in Cary, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh, and I am an assistant editor with basically the same thing, only completely online. And some of my responsibilities are getting out about 2 stories a day, whether it's from me or some of our freelancers that I oversee, and running social media.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Gavin, how about you?
Yeah, so I graduated with Ashley, so a little over 2 years ago. My current title would just be reporter. I work for the Gaston Gazette in Gastonia, North Carolina, which is a daily newspaper. We are owned by Gannett, who is under the USA Today umbrella. I'm actually off today, but usually I work during the week. I generally try to write I try to reach 9 stories a week. Sometimes and often I shoot my own photos, responsible for posting all of my stories to social media. That is the only way we really get high viewership. And then of course, live streams and some video work here and there. But also I'm general assignment, but I handle everything having to do with the county school system here, and as well as Belmont Abbey College, which is a private Catholic school, just probably a mile from my house, but and we also have a community college here as well. Shelby Star in Shelby, North Carolina is a sister paper of ours, and sometimes I will double dip and cover some things for them as well. So the 2 newsrooms work very close together.
Awesome. Cool. Hey, Brandon, how about you?
So I graduated in the fall of 2016. I'm a reporter at WPRI 12 in Providence, Rhode Island. After I graduated, I had 2 years in Greenville, North Carolina, where I worked at a station there, and really kind of like dug into the roots of, I guess, how it kind of works. You want to like make your mistakes in smaller markets and then work your way up, and then the pressure is on like the further you climb. But for the most part, I'm general assignment reporting. I have been working mornings since I got here in May of last year, and just this week I had a meeting where they're moving me dayside, so that'll be a lifestyle change. It's somewhat of a good promotion, more pressure. It's in the primetime shows, so that'll be exciting. So it'll kind of switch up my work responsibilities just a little bit and the types of stories I cover. I kind of like Gavin was saying, I feel like it's really important about like the companies that kind of own you in a way. So for instance, this station is owned by Nexstar, who also owned the station I was at in Greenville, North Carolina. So I was able to like transfer stations way easier. They actually called me and basically like recruited me up. So that's a really interesting point I think we can talk about later about kind of how that works, and you could use it towards your benefit in terms of like climbing up if you want. But yeah, so I do television reporting, a lot of social media. I mean, Gavin hit on it as well about how many stories we do. I do like roughly 2 stories a day for television. And then I try to write up a web thing, even though we have people that are kind of helping me with that just because of all of the elements that are going into it. I do some video on my own sometimes. It just kind of depends. Although in this new position, I won't be, which I'm stoked about. I like the writing and reporting part. So yeah, I guess that's enough for now.
I did not mention where I worked after college. I kind of forgot that part.
Sure.
I worked at Hickory Daily Record for about a year, and then got my feet wet there, and then basically took a job after my year anniversary there at the Gaston Gazette. So only one paper in between college and where I am now. So yeah.
Okay. Well, and Ashley, you too, you were at the other end of the state from where you are now, weren't you, when you first started out?
Yeah, so I went an hour west of WCU to work at Clay County Progress. I forgot to mention the names as well. That was the paper I was with for a year, and now I work with Cary Citizen. And even though my title it carries more weight now as assistant editor, I still do a lot of the responsibilities of a reporter. So that's kind of interesting. But I also went from a news organization that's owned by, it was called Community Newspapers Incorporated, and they own 13 or so different papers between North Carolina and Georgia. And now by switching here, it's a startup that a husband and wife started up, I believe it was 2009, end of 2009 and the start of 2010. And it's just kind of taken off from there. It's hyper local, and it's completely supported through advertisements from local companies. So that's an interesting thing to be experiencing. Yeah.
Like your paper is kind of like Charlotte Agenda in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of hyper local. Yeah. That's awesome. And it's all through WordPress. So learn WordPress.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
We use it too. I use it almost every day. So
yeah.
Okay, so here's a note out to everybody watching this. Kata and I did not pay them to say this. That was not a question we had for them. It was actually said out there. So I'm feeling guilty because I'm telling my students to learn WordPress, and I was fumbling around through it yesterday trying to give somebody direction. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. I need to get better with this myself. So that's actually good advice. Kind of, tell us a little bit about what getting that first job was like for you guys. Like, how did that come about? How did you decide to kind of go what you wanted to do? Everybody kind of started off in a pretty small location, small kind of market. So jump in and give us an idea how that went for you.
I can speak for the television world. So it's all done by market sizes, right? So like Asheville, Greenville, Spartanburg is like roughly 34, I think. The market that Western is in, Charlotte is like market 24, where I started was market 100. I consider that a blessing. A lot of my fellow graduates were in South Dakota, Wisconsin, through the Midwest, and they were very, very far from home. So for me to get a job that was in North Carolina, I thought was a really big deal. As far as the process of getting it, I mean, it is very stressful. I don't really know how to say that like lightly. You just have to be focused. You have to, everything that you're like learning in these classes to get a portfolio ready, like that is what really impressed my employer and the guy that gave me my first job, is having kind of like content put together in one place, your website, which I still use. I still use the same website I have, and it helped me in this job that I have now as well. Just for the record, I know they can be a pain, but it did end up helping me get the job. And those are kind of the standard now, frankly, for anyone at any level. But it's a lot. Like, you're coming out of college, so you don't necessarily have a whole body of work. You're trying to like put it together in these classes, and I had tapes and I had demos, but most of my work came from my internships that reporters at these stations helped me put together. And by making connections with them, I still talk to the reporters and producers from the 2 internships I had today. And so I think that that's really important as well. And then it's just about knowing how to sell yourself as like what you're able to do. Like, someone wants to hire you because they need stuff to get done, and you have to prove that you can get it done. And I think that kind of took me a little bit to learn like how to just sell what you can do. Even if you don't think you can do it, you just gotta sell it, Yeah. So it is kind of tricky when you're first starting out, and it is stressful, but it's stressful for everyone. So
hey, and y'all can be honest here too, because I'm the first one. I tell all my students, I'm like, you know what, job hunting sucks, and it's gonna suck for the rest of your life. It just does. But you all are here as a testament to that. Guess what? You can actually get a job, and actually get more than one job. All of you have kind of moved on from your first job to your second job. So it is possible, but yeah, So you can be very honest with this particular group. So.
I mean, yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty brutal. I went several months post-college without a job, and that's including maybe 5, 6, which maybe it should have been more months of putting the word out there and trying to get applications in. And you're going to get ignored, and that part sucks. But I would say like confidence comes with time, and you do, like Brandon said, you have to figure out how to sell yourself. And that could be hard if you're kind of a shy person, or you're not comfortable being on camera. You're more of the behind the scenes person, or like me, you like typing and you like doing the interviews, but really the other people shine, not you. So it's weird to put yourself in that position sometimes. But I would say what was the deciding factor in that first job that my boss ended up telling me later when I asked at a review, I believe, it was a lot of the materials that I brought with me, like the reels that I put together to accompany stories on the Western Carolina Journalist. And a lot of that video operating experience came from taking Professor Machado's TV1 class. And so a lot of that stuff that you're being graded on, and it's kind of hard and kind of annoying and all that stuff, it does pay off. And they didn't pay me to say that. It truly does. And I believe that's what got me that job, and that's what allowed me to excel beyond what other people in that reporter position had before. I had the drive that a lot of other people didn't because of those classes.
Yeah, I was I was hired in October so I got my first news job October out of graduating in May. And I think there's a lot of pressure. I mean, especially when you're graduating around friends who are in different industries. There's kind of this weird pressure. It's like, who's going to get the job first? But is the job going to be worth it? Like, is it going to be the right job to take? And so ultimately the job that I ended up being offered and that I took was at Hickory Daily Record. And I actually did have a connection there. And so I was taking one of those certificate programs in Asheville. I took a public relations certificate program. And there was a woman there who was the director of communications for Hickory Public Schools. And she had worked for this school system for, probably close to 30 years, knew Hickory really well, and ultimately wrote me a letter of recommendation. However, I think that I don't think I actually got the job until many months after she had sent it, she probably sent it early summer. And then I, like I said, didn't start until October. So I think that, a big thing was the website, was just trying to kind of flaunt myself, really just trying to say, hey, this is like everything I did. I interned at the Silver Herald, so, I got all my writing stuff out there. And then a lot of the multimedia stuff that I did in CADIS classes and learning from the TV classes included all that I could of that, because the position that I was applying for there would have been multimedia journalist. So, we were doing all kinds of stuff with video and audio there at Hickory Records. So, and I don't think I ended up having an interview. I actually just went to lunch with the editor and we talked, and we really just made sure it was a good fit. But yeah, no, I do not be afraid to like everyone said, sell yourself. I definitely talked myself up in my cover letter and my resume, and rightfully so. But yeah, you can't be afraid of that. But also, just I don't know, if you feel that pressure, just make sure that it is also the right move too. I think my opportunity to have lunch with him and to talk about Hickory Records history and everything was really nice. And I was not familiar with that area at all. So it was kind of nice to talk all that out. And he gave me a lot of insight into what industries were there and what kind of news is there too. So, but yeah. So
can I pick up where Gavin just left off?
Yeah.
Two things. One, I had to interview, actually at both of my stations, interviews have been over food, either lunch or dinner. And doing that is not easy. I think that's really important to point out because you're like, at this station now, my news director took me to dinner and she ordered a drink. I'm like, do I order a drink? It's just like a weird thing. And then I'm like, I didn't. And there's just, it's also weird. You're eating and then like, you want to present yourself well. Like, so learning how to do that, I think, is important, because I found it very awkward both times. And then the second thing Gavin was talking about was Ashley mentioned it as well, was this like post-grad period. So I didn't get my job before I graduated. My job came 3 months after I graduated, and that 90 days is so stressful. I feel like it was a thing that we didn't talk about at school. Like, no one told me how difficult it would be. You're leaving this bubble, you're leaving comfortability, you're leaving a routine, you're leaving your friends, and then I'm back home with mom. And I'm like, how is this gonna work? Like, and some of your resources at Western aren't there anymore. It's not walking distance to go get stuff. You're in your living room. And I think that's really important to point out, that it is really uncomfortable. And one of the biggest things that got me through it was talking to my fellow graduates about how uncomfortable it was, because we were all going through it. And I wish we would have gotten a heads up on that before we graduated, because it slapped me across the face when I graduated. I mean, it was like, go, 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 graduate, done. And it's a hard adjustment. At least I found it to be. I don't know about Ashley and Gavin, but.
Absolutely. I will second everything that you just said.
Yeah.
Try to tell you that it's rough, that it's hard to find the job.
It is tough.
You know, when you're in classrooms, you kind of like not tend to get us very seriously. And that's why I appreciate when I talk with alumni for these classes to have exactly that, to hear that from you, because it's not easy to find a job. And especially in our industry, it's not, you know, it's a vast industry, but it's not that big. And,
no.
You know, and network and connections and you know, how you present yourself, how you sell yourself, it all matters. It all comes in a one package.
Yeah.
I have a question for you guys now that, you know, you've been in the industry for 4 or 2 years. Have you seen changes in how journalism is done?
Yeah. And a lot of it for me came faster than I wanted it to. Mainly because I had when I had switched jobs, you know, and came to the Gaston Gazette, I was really excited. I'm from Gastonia, so this is a community that I was raised in and I know very well. And so I was ready to get to work. And so Gatehouse Media was, basically there was a merger between Gatehouse and Gannett. Ultimately turned out to be Gannett was going to be kind of that was going to be the structure that we followed. And the layoffs came. Actually, you know, Brandy Beard, graduate of Western, was laid off, and she worked right next to me. She was the desk over, and so it wasn't just her. You know, we had a 30-year-old, or I'm sorry, he was 61. He'd worked at the Gazette for 30 years. You know, was told, sorry, you know, your position is no longer a position. You know, you have no place here anymore. And with that came the, you know, I was given specific goals that I had to meet after that. And, you know, I think that there was always pressure. So when we were writing for the Western Carolina Journalist, you know, I don't want to say that Cata was not, she definitely gave us hard deadlines, but if we did not have that story ready, then maybe, you know, maybe if we wanted to make that story right, we'll give it a little bit longer. But I think things really felt rushed after this point for me, because I was used to writing stories and being finished with them when they were right and when I wanted everything to go into them, all the right sources, all the right photos, where now I more or less have to meet quotas on what kind of content that I'm doing. And that is across Gannett. I don't know about some of the regional positions. Like I know USA Today has people all over the United States where, you know, they cover regions and they're more investigative. And I know USA Today is probably more big picture, but at least for these very small markets, which we are next to Charlotte. But yeah, I mean, it was very different. And, we're young, so it's nice that we're getting this now, but this was not what I expected. And not that any of our professors could have saw anything like that coming. And I think there is already pressure. Like, of course, when you're at a newspaper, you want to be producing stories and you want them to move. But at the same time, I don't think that anyone likes being told, at least at first, you have to write this many stories by the end of the week. It could be different for television, but at least for print, I mean, that is just not really what I was taught initially. So, but that's probably the main changes that I've experienced that I've definitely gotten more comfortable with now. And I don't think there would ever be any sort of, repercussions for, say, if I weren't to meet, as many stories as I needed to write that week. I don't think I would necessarily get in trouble for something like that. But I think that someone is probably looking at my performance somewhere. And, if I continue to trend low instead of where I need to be, then I'm sure somebody would probably talk to me. But that was just, going through that restructure and then getting all this information that I had no idea was coming. That was definitely a shock. So, but yeah, and you question yourself sometimes, is that journalism? Because sometimes, I don't know, there's just, I don't know. It's the environment changed at some point. It just wasn't what it was. But like I said, we've definitely gotten more comfortable. I'm still able to write great stories, so, there's definitely some positives to it. So yeah.
Yeah.
I
would, oops,
Because
sorry.
you're giving me license. I had all these students. I have a bunch of students and a bunch of assignments due today, and I'm getting emails all day long. Dr. Eldridge, this happened. Can I get it in tomorrow? Right? So I can say no, right? That's, you're giving Kata and I the license to say nope. Sorry, got to meet the deadline. Or
Yeah, but at the same time, the reason why I always gave you extra time is because I want you to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
There is a hard deadline, but at the same time, you're taking 3 more classes or 4 more classes than mine.
Right.
For me, I think I have to tell you that the deadline is that. There will be a repercussion. I'll take some points, but you still have the time. And it's very different. And maybe I'm not crossing that very good when I'm doing that.
One thing I failed to mention, the Gaston Gazette has a press. So most newspapers do not have an operating press anymore, because the Silver Herald, I don't know how long, but they're printing in Tennessee now. And daily papers, they're printing 3 hours away from their paper. So we have a press. So we print New York Times, we print Washington Post, we print all these papers, USA Today, of course. However, when we had the restructuring, my deadline went from 9 o'clock at night up to about 7:30. Now,
lucky, it could be 2 p.m.
Well, once they restructured again, and now I'm in the same wing as Asheville Citizen Times now. So it's us and Hendersonville, Shelby, and Gazette, and I think that's called the Western Carolina Media Group. Anyways, my deadline to my editor is noon. I mean, I'm having to have stories in by noon, and then he has to have a budget turned in no later than 4 o'clock. So there's a buffer there, but if I don't finish my story by noon, then he's not going to put it in the paper unless it's a story he really wants. Say if it's court, if there was someone who killed somebody, had a first appearance, we're going to want that in the next day's paper. But if it's just some story about schools, then it's just going to get pushed back. And that's really, that's kind of upsetting. But that is the way the industry is going. And I experienced that at Hickory Daily Record too. I mean, the deadlines once were 7 o'clock, they moved up to about 3:30 or something like that. I'm sure they've changed again. I don't know. But the actual deadlines are getting earlier because they're putting more and more papers on one press. So,
how about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that there was a shift for me going from print reporter to online editor that's responsible for 2 a day. and sometimes 3 a day, depending on we do Google Analytics to see what our readership weeks are like. And in the summer, it kind of dips, and during other months it goes up. But anyway, the length of the story changed a lot too for me, because in the print paper and with only a certain number of reporters, and I was the only one with a 4-year degree. So I got a lot of the hard hitting stuff and a lot of the longer stuff. And sometimes I would be encouraged to make it just a little bit longer so that it fits the whole page, so that we wouldn't have blank space. So then now, ever since January, I've been working with Carrie Citizen, and it's encouraged to put out more stories, but make them a lot more brief, because also in Google Analytics, you can figure out how many minutes or even seconds people on average spend on your page. And it's heartbreaking if you put together like a really good 5 or 6 minute read and you look at those analytics and people spend on average like 20, 30 seconds and they're just skimming it. So that hurt at first, I won't lie. But then I was like, okay, if that's the world I'm living in, that's how they want to consume the news. That's how I need to make the news. Yes. And so that was an interesting learning curve. But that also made it more possible to do 2 a day, whether they're all from me or mostly from me and some from freelancers.
Okay, so many good points that were mentioned. So that one thing about adjusting to how people want to consume news, that is like major to me in terms of the changes that I have seen. People always say like, there's too much news, there's too much that, or they're very, very critical of this business, but the thing is they're consuming it. So it's sometimes I don't think the viewer or the reader knows what they want until it's adjusted or not, whatever. So you'll have people, for instance, that hate headlines or whatnot, but they're reading an article for 15 seconds. So what more do they want? It's really, really interesting. But Gavin also mentioned something I thought was important. Very quickly in your first job, you'll realize you're working for a business. Like, as much as you like the craft of journalism and writing and interviewing people and putting together stories that make people cry or help people out, at the end of the day, you're working for a money-making machine, as in any job. You could say the same thing about my mom's a teacher. And when you start to look at schools as something that has to sustain itself, or churches, for instance, it's the same thing. It's a business. And it kind of takes away the shininess of it very, very quickly. So to that point, I say you have to really know your why, like why you are doing what you're doing, because you will question all of your life choices on some days. So it's just, you have to like go back to the why in those moments. I think that's important. As far as how TV has changed, it's digital. Everything from digital in terms of tweeting out a link to an article in which gets a click, in which gets a view, and maybe my story that aired is then on in that article, like embedded in it. So there's a video which people have viewed longer, or that might be how they consume I'm sorry, my phone is going crazy. That might be how they consume your story, is through a tweet and a link in the tweet. And you try to push people to television that way. At least at my station, we're very, very good and strategic about that, because as Ashley was saying, you don't want to put in all of this work into something that is really, really good and not have people see it. So my mentality of the whole digital thing shifted when I realized I could use it as a tool to get people to watch what I was doing, rather than be pissed off that it's more work. And so I think that is also something that has helped me in terms of being patient with how much digital I have to do, when maybe it's not the reason I'm in this business. It is something I can use to help promote my work. And then the great thing about digital is you just never know who's going to see your stories. Like, I've had some stories that really take off and get really good feedback from network people. And, Twitter is the definition of a double-edged sword. Like, it is, can really promote your stuff, and it can also, like, you'll learn not to read comments like very quickly. But yeah, so I think digital is the biggest thing for television, and it sounds like that's what I know, like newspapers and print are kind of doing that as well. But it's all about adjusting to viewer consumption. Yeah. But
I did want to add, my focus completely is digital now. We actually had people who at my paper who were shifted into print only, and I'm digital only. So like, I don't really get say, and I'm not really paid to care about what happens to the paper, which is very much a change. And then also, I don't know for Brandon and Ashley, but we've kind of come up with a new term for it's called alternative story format, which is an ASF. So in order to keep people on longer and to make things more brief, we'll oftentimes, especially when a lot of the school systems came out with their plans for the upcoming year, we kind of bullet pointed all the major things, and that was kind of our alternative story format. We would put that in the paper or into the story, and that's kind of a way that we have kind of had to adjust to readership, at least in here.
Interesting. So I want you guys to think here for a minute. You're bringing up some really interesting points, like that idea of it's a business and what you've had to do and to kind of adapt. So I'm going to ask you, I want the dark side and I want the positive side. Right. So do you feel like some of the questions we got were things like, do you feel political pressure, or how do you deal with the idea of fake news, or can you write what you want to, or is somebody telling you not to? So what is that kind of dark side for you, if you've experienced? And then, so I don't stay on the dark side because it's Friday and it's going to be a holiday weekend, let's also then talk about like what one of your like really great moments, or some of your favorite things about it is what you do.
I can start with this one. So I think it's important for me to put out, in my experience, I've never been told what to say ever. I view journalism as a skill, and it's a muscle you build. So I have a set of skills, I have a process, and I follow that process almost to a T. Now there are different, if I'm in front of a house that's on fire, and people are, they're trying to rescue someone, that's a different type of thing, because you're literally just telling what you're seeing and what you know, and you don't speculate. But if I'm doing a piece that's more he said, she said, and you're trying to get both sides, or frankly 3 or 4 sides to a story, that's like a little bit different. But I've never been told by my managers, by my company, what to say. Sometimes the how to say it, allegedlys are important words. Like you don't want to, we say like, you don't want to kill someone. You don't want to say 3 people died when 1 person died. Like those are very, very, very critical, factual errors. But I think for me, it's, I have a process through my internships, and really through my first job, I will say the process has become solidified. And now here, I know what I'm doing. I can say confidently, which is a nice feeling after a few years, that I feel I trust my process. And of course I have managers too, that all of my scripts are reviewed multiple times. The video is reviewed multiple times. So we're not airing a sign that says like F so-and-so on it. And then you get an FCC fine. Like everything goes through a check process. How do I deal with the fake news portion? There is not a week that goes by that someone doesn't yell it at me while I'm at a live shot or a story, or will come up to my car and want to have a conversation about it. It is a part of the job now, at least for me. When I roll up though, it's very visible, a TV station, like you cannot miss us. So I think that's part of it as well. When there's lights, cameras, and the whole work involved. So it makes you kind of an easy target. What is interesting though, is that there's just such a difference in local news and how local newsrooms are operated versus cable versus network. Like those are 3 very different things. And we could have a whole industry talk on if a viewer needs to be able to decipher that on their own, or if the industry needs to do a better job of solidifying the differences between them. That's a whole thing. But for me at least, it is a part of my daily shtick, is getting called that, or someone making a joke or yelling something at a live shot, and it gets frustrating. And again, you have to go to your why. Like I'm just going to say that over and over again, because it's been the thing that keeps me like grounded in what I'm doing. So to answer Scott, the other side, the flip side, is like, for instance, that same fire I was talking about, that was last week. There was this home on fire, 2 families lived in it. This woman went around, she saw it, she was a delivery driver, saw the fire started, banged on the windows to wake everyone up to get them out. Great story. No one died. Even better story. We love when no one dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the flip of that is it ended up turning into something where the community came together to raise money to get these people some help. And so that is like why, that is my why. Like that's why I do it, is helping people out. We had a storm come through here, a nor'easter, and it knocked out power to the senior living center. And for some reason they fell through the cracks in terms of priority of getting repaired. So there was 2.5 days of 92-degree temperatures, and you've got 80-year-olds without electricity. And like, as a result of my story, National Grid was there before the story even aired. So that's the reason why I do it. And those are the stories that kind of like keep me going and are positives. Plus it's cool when you like cover the president, or I was with Elizabeth Warren when she voted for herself in Massachusetts. She lost majorly, but you know, it was cool to like be there as she walked out of her home and like went to vote in Cambridge. So it's cool. Like those are kind of like moments too that I think I hang on to, is like, wow, I cannot believe this kid from Waynesville, North Carolina is with the presidential candidate as they're voting for themselves. So those moments are, I find pretty cool.
That's pretty awesome.
Ashley?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Dark and positive.
Yeah, so when you mentioned dark side, I first went to the emotional stress that you can be put under depending on what stories you're covering. So especially when I was working at the print newspaper and I was in charge of basically every piece of hard-hitting news, murder, arson, all of it, you have to take that home at the end of the day and figure out how you're going to deal with that. And in one case with the arson, well, first with the murder, it was a 13-year-old, and I had to bring his parents into the newsroom and tried to create an environment where they feel okay talking to me and know that I'm not going to air any more dirty laundry, that I'm going to try to do justice to their son. And that's a big responsibility, but that's a lot of emotional baggage at the end of the day. And then the arsonist, very important to use the allegedlys and at that point, Brandon, and also use according to and all that stuff. But
yeah, according to, yeah.
But yeah, I had the newsroom, like papers from courts of over 3 years and sticky notes to make sure I had the timeline right. I was not going to put a factual error in the story that is that heavy. And I did a good job. My boss said I did a great job, but I still got a death threat at the end of it from the actual arsonist on Facebook. And that was scary, to say the least. And it was the first time, and thankfully the only time that's happened, but it taught me to have thicker skin for those darker times. And yeah, it happens. But I had a team that had my back, and that's what lawyers are for, if they want to go through with that. But he didn't sue me or do any of the stuff that he said he was going to. I'm still here. Anyway, that's like super, super dark side. Other things are just like some longer hours. Sometimes if you're a perfectionist like I am and you really want that finished product to be great for tomorrow morning, you're not going to stop right at 5. You're going to keep going. And so you kind of have to have a healthy balance for yourself. I've jotted down some notes as Brandon was talking. For dark side, I put haters, like commenters, and they don't know your life. They don't know how much work you've put into it. Don't listen to them.
Can I say something really quick, Ashley? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
almost always when someone is commenting, I had a man come up and was yelling at me, and I asked him, "Did you see my story?" And of course they don't watch, or they're not actually reading the article. So that's what's always interesting, is you cannot take that personally. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what they're bringing to you. It has to do with them. And that is really hard to do. But that's where you were just telling us, I could almost guarantee that he or she hadn't even read what they were ticked off about.
Right. Yeah. It hadn't even fully hit the newsstands yet when that threat came through. So absolutely. And then the last thing on dark side, fake news, I hear it. I kind of try to ignore it to an extent, but if somebody wants to have good conversation about how they feel about the media, I'll entertain it. I'll say, this is what I do. These are the principles and the SPJ code of ethics type stuff that I learned in school and that I try to follow now. So I don't know. I'm not on the street all the time with a camera, so I don't hear it as much as Brandon. Thankfully, I would hate that, but yeah, I just try to talk it out mostly with people who are willing to. But for the upside, I did get to interview the governor, and that was cool. So like those historic moments that you're like, how did that just happen? Like when he left the room, I like sank to the floor and I was like, did I just interview him? But that didn't happen, did it? But that was like my first high profile interview. So it was like, oh, cool. Growth, your own personal growth. I look back at articles I wrote a year ago. While I'm still proud of them, I can tell I have a lot more confidence and a lot better dictation in what I say and do. And I think even more now, each sentence has a purpose. And before I tended to do a little bit more fluff. I know Kat is celebrating, I see her. And you do occasionally get thank yous. And I always appreciate those. Sometimes readers will write in or somebody will message you on Facebook and say, I really resonated with that story. It changed me for the X, Y, and Z reason. That is a big part of my why I do what I do. And so I'll leave it with that.
So we're talking about dark side and the better side of things, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
So I tried to write down a couple things, and I don't know how well. I mean, I don't know how much I can really call it dark side. But yeah, I do tend to let myself get a little overwhelmed sometimes with certain tasks. I think that a lot of times I become comfortable in my job. I have really good weeks where stories just come to me and I know how to write them, but then I get hit with a story that I know is kind of my responsibility, but I'm not sure how I need to approach it. And then I let myself get a little overwhelmed with, oh, this is a first, which, still 2 years, out of college, I'm still running into first. So for example, I wasn't going to mention this, but this is just some of the things that unfortunately we deal with in Gaston County. And there's a lot of racial strife here in Gaston County right now too. There's been a lot of things happening. I do handle education. So we do have a school board race coming up, and we do have a candidate who has made some very questionable comments on his Facebook, most, just flat out racist, blatant racist posts. And so how do you cover something like that? I mean, no one came to me and wanted to, be on record about their problem with this guy. It was more of just people tipping me off. And even the person that he was challenging on the school board wanted to talk about it because she was just like, I don't want to be involved in this because this is bad. But, I called him yesterday and asked him, about everything that he posted. And this is kind of the weird part is that he owned up to all of it. He stood by it all.
Sorry.
It made the conversation much easier. And I hate that it was like that, but I was able to control it a lot more because then I could relax and talk to him about, okay, well, what about this one? And what about this one? And we just kind of went down the line of all these, blatant, and I hesitate to say controversial because they're really not. I mean, it's just, it was flat out, these are racist comments. And so anyways, that story has not been published yet, but I did do that yesterday. I have recently, and thanks to Facebook for changing. I did not like new Facebook at first, and now Facebook has changed for desktop. Now the comments are not automatically shown on most news stories. So now when you're skimming stories, like you won't see comments unless you click see comments. And now, ever since new Facebook came out, I have kind of learned to stop reading comments because another thing about reading responses to your stories on Twitter and Facebook is that you start to question yourself and how you approach the story and did you do everything right and did you get it from all the perspectives. But as in this last year that I've been at the Gazette, now it's been like 13 months, I think my confidence has changed a lot. I think I've had low moments, but I think overall I've grown a lot, and you just kind of have to have that confidence, and it's something you'll develop. So it's not something you'll have coming right out of the gates. But I've published some awesome stories lately, and not saying that it's awesome because I wrote them. Just we've had a lot of news here that is just this is going to impact generations to come in our tiny little community. And so I've had the privilege to cover these stories and confidently report on them. And so I think I can attest, or I can attribute a lot to that, to not reading the comments and giving into that dark side, because I do still sometimes do it. You know, it's not something that you can just like, because it'll come back at you, or someone will send you an email. You know, I get crazy emails. I've been threatened before on Facebook too. So it definitely happens. And then I guess the good side, I'm trying to think of fulfilling things that have happened recently. I don't know. I haven't had like high profile interviews yet. I did interview Governor Cooper's wife, Kristen Cooper, I believe.
Yeah.
I feel like I just messed her name up. But she's really great. And you know, she visited. We have a women's shelter here that's purposely off the map. And so she came, and I kind of got to talk to her about her impressions on the community. I don't know. I think I did a story recently, so I'm sure across this, United States, there's been all kinds of drive-by celebrations, when you've got 100-year-old birthday and you've got a parade of cars going by. So there was a coach he was a coach of a very successful basketball team here in Gastonia, probably in the 70s, maybe in the late 60s. But he's pretty, he's getting up there now. And I believe it was his birthday. Sleepy Floyd, and I can't remember his first name, but he's a very, he was a very successful basketball player, but he came back. He's from Gastonia, and he came back and greeted him with like cards, and they gave him money too, because he had some surgeries he had to get done. He lived in a very, basic house. So it was a really great thing for the community to come together. Everyone was wearing masks, thankfully. So, that was really nice. And the last one I want to mention, just as a, here in Belmont, which is where I live, we have a high school here, South Point High School. The mascot is the Red Raiders. And there's been a lot of push to get the Red Raiders taken from the school, to take that mascot and take the imagery out, for its basically, the school has been accused of a lot of cultural appropriation and everything over the years. And so I was able to cover, sorry, I keep getting phone calls. I think we're still here. But I was able to cover the story from what I thought a very, I consider this a very positive story. There were tons of negative comments, but there was a girl who got county permission to change schools because she was a rising ninth grader and she was Native American, and it infected her. And she's like, I do not want to go to this school. They gave her the permission to go to somewhere else, but the story never got told. And I got to tell that story years later. Oh, and that says a lot about this community here and the school system here. And I kind of got to unearth that. And that was very fulfilling. And like I said, that could have been a dark story, could have been a dark moment, I guess, in my career, but I worked really hard on that story. I worked really hard on the sources for it. And that's another thing. I think Brandon totally got at it, but influence, you kind of get to influence communities, by your writing. And so you were talking about how the community came together to give money and to donate money and everything. And, fortunately, yeah, I've had several stories like that where, we've had someone who was hit by a car and then I covered it. It was a very negative story, but then next thing you know, there was a woman who found out he really liked the Patriots, so she donates a lot of Patriots football gear. So things like that, it's really great stuff.
That's pretty awesome. So I'm true to form. Communication folks are pretty chatty, which I am so loving all of this. One of the things I do want to ask before we kind of get too much further is, some of this is for kind of the intro to professional development class. You all have mentioned you did a lot of things while you were here at Western. I know that Brandon, you were in marching band, which at Western is kind of a way of life, and having to balance that with kind of majoring in communication.
Gavin was also in that too.
Gavin was in band. I know, Gavin, you kind of, at one point you were kind of thinking, public relations, journalism, which way do I want to go? And
Yeah.
you kind of went and did the extra digital certificate
And
program that's not even part of the program.
I'm still doing some PR stuff too. I didn't actually talk about that, but we can keep going.
Yeah, and Ashley, you kind of talked a little bit about like taking TV classes, and now you're doing print stuff. So you guys did a lot of things. What is some of the things you think that students now, while they're here, should do, be thinking about? What's maybe something you didn't do that maybe now you look back and say, yeah, that would have been a good idea for me to do, that would have kind of helped me? What kind of advice to those folks that are still kind of moving through the program?
I would say get involved in the clubs, and if you're journalism, SPJ, Western Carolina Journalist. I was reporter a couple years, and then a section editor, and then editor-in-chief, and that looks good on a resume, especially if you're coming right out of college. Get as much experience as you can while you're taking classes. But I would say the biggest thing for me was getting a good internship. I actually, in Kata's class, it was feature writing and it was like a lot of magazine based stuff. And we were doing a presentation in the class of find a magazine's online presence that pretty much sucks and then find one that you really like. And so I did a decent amount of research. I put some time into that one, and I'm glad I did, because the one that I really liked was Blue Ridge Outdoor Magazine. And that was one of my, just go for it, just make the ask. The worst you're going to hear is no. And I got told yes, and I got to write for 250,000 readership. And that made a big difference on my resume going into my first job.
And you got some good freelancing gigs from that.
Mm-hmm. Made some money.
Gavin, go ahead.
I think that looking back, so yeah, I was kind of on the fence there for a little bit, but actually kind of found a way to do, I guess, freelance social media work, and kind of, not really PR work, but definitely learned, I think it all is kind of in the same boat. But yeah, I think I should have just, in general, I should have left Western more experienced, and maybe just more, I should have gotten more experience just out in the field. My internship was at the Silver Herald, and technically, I think I took 2 internship credits, so I was there a lot. And I wrote stories. The people, at least people then who worked there, were all very seasoned journalists. They had all, been to some pretty awesome publications. But the Silver Herald, was, it's small town news. It's a weekly paper. So I wish that maybe I should have done something bigger, kind of like Ashley, like, something that had more readership. I wish that maybe I would have gotten a second internship at some point. I was very involved with music around this time, so that was also taking up a lot of my time. I also had a job. So I wish I would have gotten more experience. And honestly, I think I did a really good job of just getting professional development. So I think I did a good job of that, but maybe I didn't bring my experience level up to where that was. I think is the only really regret that I have. But yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, so I'll try to keep like my stuff brief, because I think both had good points. But I did a lot in college. You could probably argue too much in college. Like I was a part of a lot of stuff. I think you pull from those experiences what you can for any job. Much like a great resume, you tailor it to the position you're going for. So I could take the fact I was in a fraternity, and that can mean something different for the guys who were in accounting, who are in communications, who are in whatever. And you can pull different things from any club and put that and angle it to what the job needs out of you. I think that's really important. But the biggest thing for me was just the internships. I had an internship at WIFF News 4 in Greenville, which is the NBC station that Western gets. And then I wanted kind of I wanted to be exposed to a larger market. I really aimed the second summer, because I had like a little victory lap in the fall of 16. So I had an extra summer to do one. And so I ended up doing 2 internships, and I wanted to go for a top 10. And so I got an internship at Fox 5 Atlanta, which I really appreciate. I knew I would not get there out of college. There's just no way. But it showed me like what I'm working toward when you're trying to get to something that is as resourced as that operation. So for me, I mean, great experiences at both stations. I learned a ton at both stations. And I think, you know, not to add pressure to anyone in the 200 level, I think it is, class, or someone who's looking for an internship right now, but that was the thing, a solid internship really kind of changed the course. And it was the thing that made me say, like, I want to do this. So I think that that is also was a important thing for me.
Awesome stuff. I have right now I'm having 496 students do they're turning in today the first half of a personal branding assignment. This is kind of what they have to think about in terms of who they are, what their passions are, and kind of what their goals are. You know, how do they want to represent themselves? And this is actually kind of an extensive, maybe self-reflection that will happen over the course of the semester. And this is new. I'm trying it for the first time in this class.
Yeah,
But
I'm talking about that next week.
yeah, you know, and the idea is to get folks trying to think about that. And I know those are tough questions. For you guys, how did you get to the point that this is what you wanted to do?
Are you there?
And are you there, or is there something else, or are you still working on this?
I can pick this up first. So I sometimes question, like, myself, and am I doing this? We've not discussed money. I think that is a huge factor that has to be discussed. Like, again, I don't know how blunt to be.
Absolutely, be blunt.
Like,
nobody talks about money, and we should.
Sucks. Okay, we'll take a great example. Hoda Kotb, right, anchor of the Today Show. She's making roughly $8 million a year now. Her first job forever ago, she made $22,000 a year starting. I can tell you that number's not changed that much, like in terms of like starting salaries. So granted, she started 35 years ago, 40 years ago, but the money they're paying out starting salaries is not really adjusted. So just be prepared for the shock of how little you're going to make when you start, and even still into it a little bit. That is another pro for me in terms of like moving up markets. It sucks to move every 2 years, but like at some point I got to live, right? Like I've got to make some money. And that's part of me sacrificing moving around, is to move up and increase my salary. So there's a whole business discussion we could have about this, but I think that will make you question it pretty significantly when you're working Christmas, when you're working Thanksgiving, when you're working New Year's morning at 4 a.m. You start to question things, and when the days get tough. And so I think that's an ever evolving thing. And even people that I work with who have been in this business for 25 years have those days. So take that for how you want. It's not the most secure industry, as Gavin was talking about with people getting laid off. The flip side to starting out is you're cheap, right? Like you work for cheap. So you're very appealing to a company rather than a reporter who's been there for 25 years and is making 5 times the money that you are. They can get rid of him, hire 5 of you. And so in a very dark and twisted way, that is an advantage for people trying to start out. In terms of branding, I think that's a really interesting thing, because I never know how to define it. Like, how do I take the way I carry myself and translate it into visual or definition that people can understand? And I'm trying to do a good job of that. But, you know, I think you got to just stay true to yourself and who you are, and realize that you're going to do a story different than the way a coworker would if they were on the same story. And you've got to stay true to that. Don't try to do a story. One of my mentors is Gio Benitez, who's at ABC News. I can't do a story the way Gio does it. I just can't. And I'm not supposed to. I've got to do the story the way I would do it. And I think that over time creates your brand in terms of journalism. Yeah. That's my take.
Well, I'll extend on that money thing briefly. I remember I took, I think, the senior seminar is it 496? Is that the right number?
That's the one.
Yeah.
With Don Connolly. And I remember a very specific slide because I was paying attention, taking notes of what I can expect. And the figure 35,000 was right there. And I was like, okay, I can expect that starting out. I'm an assistant editor. I still don't make that.
Yeah.
I still don't make that.
It's brutal. and
And
thank you for being honest. That's so important. Like,
Yeah.
I have coworkers and we are very honest about our salaries, and our general managers hate it because it gives us leverage in negotiations. But I think my personal opinion on this is, I think if someone is comfortable sharing it, I think it only benefits everyone else, like in these moments. Like, so thank you for saying that, because a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it, which I also get. It can be awkward. But there are definitely pros and cons to doing it. A lot of people think it's unprofessional, but I think it helps everyone out in terms of realistic expectations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure. And when I first started out at my first job, I didn't mention at weekly print newspaper. I started part-time and had to prove myself until they offered me full-time when I was going to go work somewhere else that had nothing to do with journalism, just so I could make more money. They're like, wait, stay, we'll give you more. Barely, but at least you can stay doing the thing that you love. And so I did that for a little while, and then I spent 6 months unemployed after we had moved, my fiance and I, closer to be toward family. She found a much more gratifying, better paying job. Great for her, but 6 months unemployed took a toll on me. And so when I did get an offer with Cary Citizen, I didn't really have a foot to stand on to be super picky or to negotiate. It was, here's what we're offering, and you get to be an assistant editor, and you get to start working in like a week or two. I took it. But now that I've been here 6 months, as soon as I get to my year, I'm gonna have a leg to stand on and say, this is what I've proven, and this is what the average for somebody in an assistant editor position is. I understand we're smaller scale, but do you think we can make this happen? So the only person that's going to advocate for you in this business is yourself, mostly.
Oh God.
I would say. So
Preach.
you gotta learn to advocate for yourself. And
negotiating.
Negotiating. I mean, don't be too rough about it, because then you could also lose your job. But I mean, if you go about it the right way, you got to learn to go about it the right way. Yeah. But I would say what I'm doing right now is very fulfilling. I enjoy it. I enjoy where I'm at. But at the same time, I wish I could be making more money. But at the same time, I'm interviewing a lot of people from a lot of different areas, and some areas that I would consider working in. And so in a way, by being a journalist, I'm also out kind of meeting and interacting. What's the word? Networking constantly. And so I would say that is also a bonus to being a communications major. You find ways to meet a bunch of people, and a lot of doors open the more you get out there.
Awesome.
Well, I was not originally a communications major. I was actually, I came in undecided, declared communication at the end of my freshman year, and then was broadcasting, but didn't pick up journalism until possibly, I don't know,
the last year of your school.
pretty close to, I'm pretty close to my junior year. And I realized that I liked writing more. And I had always enjoyed production because of music and whatever else, videos and whatnot and social media. So I was always interested in production, declared communication in college. I won't talk about money too much, but it sounds like me and Ashley are right in the same boat, for our age. We make around the same amount of money. I will say, with all the layoffs, we had furloughs, and there was a cutoff. It was like, if you made more than this amount, you had to take this many furlough days. I did not meet the cutoff. I was not put on furlough. So during the pandemic, I actually was very fortunate. Sometimes it pays to not get paid. That is so it was me and another person, and we had talked about it. But anyways, won't talk too much about that, because you guys shouldn't, the students who are going out there should not expect to make tons of money out of school. So as far as where I am now, I'm much happier than I'd say I was a year ago. When all the changes started happening, I felt like emotionally, I started to I was a little lost when all the changes came. And I was like, wow, like, is this really my calling? And it made me question that. Now, I don't think I still don't think I'm 100% sure what my calling is. What I do know though, is that, this is a very fulfilling job, and I enjoy the stories that I do. I love the education beat. I love, especially right now in the pandemic, because there's so much news, and I think we've lost a lot of news, but we've also gotten more with the pandemic. And so, I definitely don't think I'm there. I do contract work. So I'm definitely experimenting with other things. There's a marketing kind of videography company here that I do social media for some of some of their contracts that they have with businesses around here. So I do that on the side. I'm still, because we're young, I feel like, and I've also freelanced too. Charlotte 5, which is the kind of arts and entertainment division of Charlotte Observer. I've freelanced for them a couple times, just writing like restaurant, bar stories, just trendy stuff that's like, honestly, it's really good. It's brief. So I've been just kind of doing stuff like that, still trying to find my place. But as far as my full-time goes and the Gaston Gazette goes, yeah, I'm in a really good spot, a lot better than I was when all the changes started taking place. But at the same time, and nobody, any of your students who are, listening to us right now, once they get to this point, I don't think that they need, to have figured that out. If they have, that's great. And that's awesome. But, I think Ashley, Brandon, and I are very fortunate, even though, we're in tough industries that don't have, they have fulfillment, but they don't have high compensation. I think we are very fortunate, because I do believe that there are graduates out there our age that, never figured it out, or they're in the industry, but they're still having second guesses. So we're very fortunate. And I think, I don't know if we're best case scenario, but yeah, I think we're
How
definitely
about that?
Damn good scenarios.
Yeah.
I would like to know. I don't know. I would
You're
like.
gonna get the better ones.
But anyways, yeah. So that's where I am with
Yeah.
everything.
That is awesome. I want to be mindful of time here. I know that I think Ashley, you've got something you gotta jump off at, and I honestly,
Yeah.
I could sit here and talk to you guys for another hour, because I have a gazillions of questions. But I know that you're journalists. You got to get out there and write the stories, right?
Well, we can give our emails if students have questions.
Yes.
I mean, we can
Yeah.
also give our emails, and they can ask us directly. I'd be happy to answer questions afterward.
Okay.
Mine will need to do some virtual shadowing. So if you guys don't mind, if I can put those emails there, and if they can contact you and kind of like do talk with you via Zoom a little bit more, and kind of like understand your job a little bit easier, better, and if they want to go in journalism. I don't have too many journalists in 296, but this would be good, a resource for them.
Yeah.
So awesome. Thank you guys. I'm
you.
gonna go ahead and stop the recording now, but thank you so much for doing this. Like I said, it's just probably one of the best parts about my job is I get to talk to graduates that have gone out there, and I'm just so excited to kind of be able to talk to you and have you guys share what's going on with you. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.